He stepped back from the door, looking up at the second-floor windows, searching for a sign of movement. "Come out here and tell me why," he screamed. His voice broke. It was the sound of a boy realizing his hero is the villain. "Tell me why you sold it to them. Tell me why you didn't call me." Still, silence from the big house. Matt Roloff, the man who loves to control the narrative, who loves to be the director of the show, was refusing to take the stage. He was walling himself off. And that silence was more insulting than any argument could have been. It said, "You are not worth the explanation. The deal is done. Go away." In a fit of absolute frustration, unable to break down the door and unable to get the closure he needed, Jeremy turned his aggression toward the nearest object. There was a large, decorative planter by the entrance, likely one of Matt's expensive aesthetic touches. Jeremy reportedly wound up and kicked it with full force. The sound of the planter tipping over and shattering against the concrete was the climax of the violence. Soil spilled out across the perfect welcome mat. A plant, uprooted, lay dying on the porch. It was a perfect metaphor for the relationship. Broken, messy, uprooted. Jeremy stood over the shattered pottery, breathing heavily, his chest heaving. He stared at the mess he had made, and for a second, he looked like he might regret it. But then he looked back at the door that remained shut. The regret vanished. He realized that no amount of pounding, no amount of screaming, and no amount of broken planters would make Matt care in the way Jeremy needed him to care. The father he was looking for wasn't in that house. Maybe he never was. He turned around, his face flushed red, tears likely stinging his eyes, though he fought them back. He walked back to his truck, not running this time, but walking with the heavy, leaden steps of someone who is carrying a burden that will never really go away. He had come to save a steeple. He was leaving with nothing. The landscapers watched him go. The salvage crew down the hill continued their work, the sound of the crane whining in the distance as it likely loaded the Japanese-bound container. Jeremy got back into his vehicle, slammed the door one last time, and reversed out of the driveway, tires spinning on the asphalt. He drove away from the big house, away from the western town, and away from the farm. But as he drove, the adrenaline began to fade, and the reality of the situation began to settle in. This wasn't just a fight. This wasn't just a bad afternoon. This was the end. The bridge hadn't just been burned, it had been dynamited. The yelling at the door, the liar comment, the physical destruction of property. There is no walking that back. There is no sorry card that fixes this. As we move into the final analysis of this tragic event, we have to ask ourselves, what happens when the cameras turn off? We know what TLC shows us, but this raw, unadulterated pain, this is the real story. And the fallout from this explosion at the front door is going to ripple through the Roloff family for generations. The steeple is going to Japan. Jeremy is going home to a life that is now completely severed from his past. And Matt? Matt is left in his big house, behind his locked door, with his check from the collector, and a son who may never speak to him again. As the dust settled on the driveway of the big house, a heavy silence descended over the farm. Jeremy Roloff was gone. His truck was just a speck disappearing down the winding country roads of Helvetia, putting miles between himself and the father he once idolized. But back at the scene of the confrontation, the energy was vibrating with a dark intensity. We have to pivot now to what was happening inside that house. While Jeremy was screaming at the door, while he was kicking over the planter in a fit of absolute despair, what was Matt Roloff doing? Exclusive insiders who are familiar with the layout and the daily operations of the farm have provided us with a chilling theory. They suggest that Matt wasn't just ignoring the door. He was watching. The big house is equipped with a state-of-the-art security system, cameras that cover every angle of the driveway and the porch. It is highly probable, according to these sources, that Matt Roloff stood safely on the other side of that reinforced wood, watching his sons break down on a high-definition monitor. He saw the tears. He saw the rage. He heard the word liar through the audio feed, and he chose not to move. Listen closely. Do you hear that? It is the low, grinding groan of a diesel engine. It is the sound of metal teeth biting into rotting wood. It is the sound of a bulldozer. But for one man, that sound wasn't just construction. It was the sound of a heart breaking. For years, Jeremy Roloff has stayed silent. He has bitten his tongue, looked the other way, and maintained a polite distance as his father, Matt Roloff, systematically dismantled the family legacy piece by piece. We have all watched the tension simmer. We have all seen the passive-aggressive Instagram posts and the awkward holiday gatherings. But silence has a breaking point. And as the heavy machinery rolled in to tear down the iconic Western town, the very soul of the Roloff childhood, Jeremy finally snapped. We are not talking about a polite disagreement. We are not talking about a cryptic quote on social media. We are talking about an alleged, full-blown, screaming confrontation at the door of the big house that has reportedly shattered the remaining bond between father and son forever. Today, we are peeling back the PR statements and the reality TV gloss to reveal the heartbreaking reports of what actually happened when Jeremy arrived at the farm, only to find his history being sold for scrap. We are diving deep into the explosive shouting match, the desperate cash offer that was coldly rejected, and the moment Jeremy Roloff walked away from his father for what might be the very last time. Before we expose the details of this devastating family collapse, I need you to take a split second to support the channel. If you believe that family memories should be worth more than a quick buck, go ahead and hit that like button right now. It shows us that you care about the truth behind the cameras. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on those notifications. We are tracking this story hour by hour, and trust me, you do not want to miss what comes next. To understand why this specific day turned into such a nightmare, we have to understand what was being destroyed. For casual viewers, the Western town was just a fun backdrop on the show. It was a quirky project Matt built. But for Jeremy, Zach, Molly, and Jacob, that dusty collection of storefronts was the center of their universe. It was where they played, where they hid, where they filmed their home movies, and where they bonded as siblings before the cameras and the fame complicated everything. It wasn't just lumber and paint. It was a physical manifestation of a happier time. For years, sources close to the family have whispered that Jeremy held on to the hope that he would one day take over the farm, not just to own land, but to preserve these specific landmarks. He wanted his own children to play in the jailhouse and run through the saloon doors just like he did. When the negotiations for the farm fell through and Matt refused to sell to the kids, the first layer of resentment was laid down. But Jeremy kept his cool. He moved on. He bought his own property. He tried to take the high road. However, recent insider reports suggest that Matt made a promise, a verbal agreement that was never aired on TLC. Rumors have circulated for months among locals in Helvetia that Matt had assured the boys that if the Western town ever had to come down for safety reasons, they would get first dibs on the memorabilia. They would be allowed to salvage the pieces of their childhood before the vultures circled. It was a small consolation, a way to keep the history alive even if the structures were gone. But Matt Roloff is a businessman, and sometimes business overlooks sentiment. The atmosphere on the day of the auction was described by onlookers as chaotic and clinical. It was a cold, overcast afternoon in Oregon. The farm, usually vibrant with pumpkin season energy or golden hour filming lights, felt like a graveyard. Strangers, pickers, antique dealers, and scrap merchants were swarming over the property like ants. They weren't there to honor the Roloff legacy. They were there to strip it for parts. They were pricing the windows, the old wagon wheels, and the signage. Everything had a price tag. According to witness accounts from the ground, Jeremy Roloff's truck pulled onto the property around 1:25 p.m. He wasn't there for a scheduled filming session. There were no camera crews flanking him. This was personal. Sources say he looked disheveled, anxious, and deeply focused. He hadn't come to have tea with his dad. He had come because he heard the rumors that the demolition had started early, and he was racing against the clock. Imagine the scene through his eyes. You drive up the long gravel driveway that you have traveled thousands of times since you were a baby. But instead of seeing the farm you love, you see a salvage operation. You hear the crunch of heavy equipment. You see men you don't know loading pieces of your life into the back of flatbed trailers. Witnesses claim Jeremy parked his truck haphazardly, barely fully off the road, and jogged toward the western town. He didn't go to the main office. He didn't go to the house. He went straight to destruction. What he found there reportedly stopped him dead in his tracks. The bank, the sheriff's office, the structures he helped paint were already half gone. It wasn't a careful deconstruction. It was a demolition. But there was one specific item Jeremy was looking for. One specific piece of the western town that held more meaning than anything else. And this is where the story takes a turn that no one saw coming. We have heard reports from a source who claims to have been working with the salvage crew that day. This insider alleges that Jeremy was looking for the steeple, the iconic wooden spire that sat atop the church in the western town. Why the steeple? To the outside world, it's just wood. But to Jeremy, that steeple represented the faith and the foundation of the family before the divorce, before the feuds, before everything fell apart. It was symbolic. He wanted that steeple for his own property, a cornerstone to build his new life around while honoring where he came from. The report states that Jeremy arrived just as a heavy-duty crane was lowering the steeple onto a muddy patch of ground. He reportedly rushed over, ignoring the safety tape, frantic to claim it. He wasn't aggressive at this point. He was desperate. He was a son trying to save a piece of his father, even as his father was selling it all away. You have to understand the psychology here. Jeremy has lost the farm. He has lost the dream of raising his kids there. He has lost the close-knit family unit. He has lost so much. In that moment, saving that wooden steeple probably felt like saving himself. It was a frantic grasp for control in a situation where he had none. He approached the foreman of the crew. Witnesses say the conversation started civilly, but quickly grew intense. Jeremy was gesturing, pointing at the steeple, then pointing back to his truck. He was seen pulling out his wallet, then checking his phone, likely looking at bank balances or trying to call someone, maybe Matt, maybe his wife Audrey. But Matt wasn't answering. Matt was nowhere to be found near the western town. He was reportedly holed up in the big house, the massive dream home he built overlooking the farm, effectively hiding from the emotional carnage happening down the hill. Jeremy's desperation began to rise. The noise of the bulldozers was drowning out his voice, forcing him to shout to be heard by the crew. "Stop! Don't load that!" he was heard yelling. This is a man who is usually composed, usually careful about his public image. But the veneer was cracking. The raw emotion of seeing his childhood dismantled was taking over. He wasn't acting like a reality TV star at that moment. He was acting like a man watching his house burn down. He began pleading with the workers. "That's mine. That's my family. You can't just take that." But the workers were just doing a job. They had work orders signed by Matt Roloff. They had schedules to keep. They didn't care about the sentimental value of a wooden church tower. To them, it was just inventory. This is the moment where the heartbreak truly sets in. It wasn't just that the farm was changing. It was the callousness of the process. It was the fact that Jeremy had to find out about this from third parties, that he had to race over there like an intruder on his own childhood home. It speaks volumes about the lack of communication between Matt and Jeremy. If they were on speaking terms, surely Matt would have set the steeple aside. Surely he would have sent a text saying, "Come get what you want before the auction." The silence from Matt was deafening. And as Jeremy stood there in the mud, surrounded by strangers, the realization must have hit him like a physical blow. His father hadn't thought of him. In the rush to liquidate, in the rush to turn the page and satisfy the new vision for the farm, Matt had forgotten, or worse, ignored, the emotional toll this would take on his children. The setup is complete. The stage is set. Jeremy is on the ground, desperate and emotional. The destruction is happening all around him. The noise is deafening. and he's about to face a rejection that will send him storming up that hill to the big house. What happens next involves a cash offer, a Japanese collector, and a screaming match that will go down in Roloff history. But to understand the explosion, you had to understand the pressure cooker that was this auction. Jeremy didn't just snap out of nowhere. He snapped because he was watching his past being erased, dollar by dollar, right in front of his eyes. The air around the western town was thick with diesel fumes and the damp chill of the Oregon afternoon, but for Jeremy, the temperature had spiked. He was standing in the mud, his boots sinking into the ground that he used to run across as a child, staring at the foreman of the salvage crew. This wasn't a celebrity interaction. This was a desperate man trying to make a deal. According to exclusive details provided to us by an insider who was present at the site, Jeremy didn't just ask for the steeple. He tried to buy it back on the spot. Witnesses described Jeremy reaching into his pocket and pulling out a substantial amount of cash. Emergency funds, perhaps, or money he had brought specifically because he suspected something like this might happen. He was reportedly heard saying, "I don't care what the bid was. I will match it. I will double it right now. Just do not put that on the truck." You have to feel the weight of that moment. Here is a man who has moved on, who has his own life, his own farm, his own family, yet he is reduced to bartering with a stranger for a piece of wood that his father owns. It is a humiliating position to be in, forced to buy back your own heritage because your father didn't value it enough to save it for you. The foreman, a man who likely just wanted to finish his shift and get paid, looked uncomfortable. He allegedly checked his clipboard, then looked back at the crane operator, then back at Jeremy. The tension was palpable. The heavy machinery idled in the background, a mechanical growl that underscored the standoff. Jeremy was pleading now, his voice cracking with a mix of frustration and sorrow. "Please," he was heard saying, "you don't understand. My dad built this. It's supposed to stay in the family. Just let me call him." But he couldn't call him. Or rather, he could, but nobody was picking up. The phone lines to the big house were silent. And then came the blow that knocked the wind out of Jeremy Roloff. The twist that turns this from a sad story into a tragedy. The foreman shook his head. He didn't take the cash. He didn't step aside. He looked Jeremy in the eye and delivered the news that we are reporting here for the first time as a highly credible insider theory. The foreman reportedly told Jeremy, "I can't sell it to you, son. It's not just sold. It's contracted. It's already gone." Jeremy pushed back, asking who bought it. Surely it was a local. Surely it was someone he could reason with. But the answer he got was colder than the steel of the bulldozer. The insider claims the foreman revealed that the entire church structure, specifically the steeple and the facade, had been purchased as a set by a high-end architectural collector based in Japan. Let that sink in for a moment. Japan. Not a neighbor in Hillsborough, not a fan in Portland, but a collector across the ocean. This wasn't a casual yard sale deal. This implies that Matt Roloff had been negotiating this sale for weeks, maybe months. International shipping of architectural salvage requires permits, crates, logistics. This wasn't a last-minute decision to clear space. This was a calculated business move. The revelation reportedly left Jeremy stunned. He looked at the steeple, dangling from the crane straps, and realized that in a matter of days, it would be in a shipping container, crossing the Pacific, destined to be a decoration in someone else's garden or a prop in a theme park thousands of miles away from the soil where it was built. The absolute finality of it crushed him. If it was sold to a neighbor, he could beg to buy it back later. But Japan? It was gone. It was effectively erased from his world. The betrayal here is multi-layered. It's not just that Matt sold it, it's that he sold it so far away that the kids could never visit it again. It was a scorching of the earth. It sends a message, intentional or not, that the history of the farm is for sale to the highest bidder, regardless of geography, regardless of sentiment. The memory of the Roloff kids playing in that church was being exported for profit. Jeremy stood there for a long moment, the cash still in his hand, looking at the workers who were now securing the steeple onto the flatbed. He looked defeated, but then the defeat shifted. You could see the physical change in his posture. His shoulders squared, His grip on his keys tightened until his knuckles were white. The sadness evaporated, and in its place, a pure, unadulterated rage began to boil over. He realized he was wasting his time talking to the employees. The foreman was just the messenger. The architect of this heartbreak was up the hill. The man who signed the papers, the man who cashed the check from the Japanese collector, the man who promised, allegedly, that the kids would have first refusal, was hiding in his castle. Jeremy spun around, mud kicking up from his boots. He didn't walk back to his truck immediately. He paced a tight circle, running his hand through his hair, a gesture he often does when he is stressed. But this was different. This was manic. He was processing the lie. If the rumors of the promise are true, that Matt said, "I'll let you know before anything goes," then this was a direct violation of a father's word. And for Jeremy, a man who prides himself on values and intentionality, being lied to is a greater sin than the destruction itself. He got back into his truck, but he didn't drive away. He slammed the door so hard the vehicle rocked. He revved the engine, the aggressive roar of the motor echoing off the remaining skeletons of the western town. He threw the truck into gear and tore up the gravel road. But he didn't turn left toward the highway to go home to Audrey and the kids. He turned right. He turned toward the big house. The drive up that hill is short, but for Jeremy, it must have felt like a lifetime of disappointments flashing before his eyes. Every bump in the road, every fence post, every tree was a reminder of the empire Matt built, and the empire Matt was now dismantling. As he ascended the driveway, the massive custom home loomed into view. It is a symbol of Matt's new life, a life that increasingly seems to have no room for the old memories. Jeremy pulled up to the front of the big house, screeching to a halt on the pristine pavement. The contrast was jarring. Down the hill, mud, destruction, noise, scrap metal. Up here, silence, luxury, manicured landscaping. It was two different worlds. And Jeremy was bringing the chaos of the bottom of the hill right to Matt's front door. Witnesses who were working on the landscaping nearby, and yes, there are always eyes on the farm, reported that Jeremy didn't just walk to the door. He stormed. He marched with a velocity that screamed confrontation. He bypassed the doorbell. He didn't wait for an invitation. He began pounding on the heavy front door with his fist. Bam, bam, bam. The sound echoed. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the knock of someone who demanded an answer. "Open the door," he reportedly shouted. The voice that is usually so calm on podcasts, so measured in interviews, was raw and guttural. "I know you're in there. Open the door, Dad." There was no answer. The house remained silent. The blinds were drawn. To anyone else, it might have looked like nobody was home. But Jeremy knew. He knew Matt's schedule. He knew Matt's truck was parked around the back. He knew that his father was likely sitting in that expansive living room, perhaps watching the security feed, perhaps just ignoring the problem, hoping it would go away. And that refusal to engage, that cowardice in the face of his son's pain, poured gasoline on the fire. Jeremy pounded again, harder this time, kicking the bottom of the door with his boot. "You promised!" The words were clear, heard by the landscapers who had stopped their work to watch the drama unfold. "You are a liar! You looked me in the eye and you promised." The accusation hung in the air. Liar. It is a heavy word to throw at a parent. It implies a total breach of trust. It suggests that this wasn't a misunderstanding, but a calculated deception. Jeremy wasn't just mad about the steeple anymore. He was mad about the farm negotiation. He was mad about the years of strings being pulled. He was mad that he had to find out about the death of his childhood from a stranger with a clipboard. The tragedy of the Roloff story is that it started with a dream of a legacy. Matt always talked about building the farm for the kids. "This is for the grandkids," he would say. "This is for the future." But when the future arrived, the price tag was too high. The ego was too big. And now, the legacy is being parted out and shipped away in crates. The western town is gone. The castle is crumbling. The pumpkin patch is just a commercial venue. The soul of the show, the family unit, has been dismantled just as ruthlessly as that old church steeple. When Jeremy kicked that planter over, he wasn't just breaking a pot, he was breaking the illusion. He was rejecting the script that Matt has tried to write for them for decades. He was saying, "I am done playing your game." It was a moment of ugly, raw, necessary truth. So, as we close the book on this devastating chapter, we have to look at the wreckage. On one side, you have Matt Roloff, wealthy, living in his dream mansion, surrounded by his land, but increasingly isolated from the blood relatives who made that land famous. On the other side, you have Jeremy, hurt, angry, and grieving the loss of his history, but free from the manipulation, building his own life on his own terms, even if he has to do it without the mementos he was promised. It leaves us with a heavy question, and I need you to be honest with me in the comments right now. This is the debate that is tearing the fan base apart. Who is in the wrong here? Is it Matt Roloff? Is it his property, his money, and his right to sell to the highest bidder, even if that bidder is in Japan? Is business just business, and Jeremy should have made a formal offer sooner? Or is Jeremy 100% justified in his rage? Did Matt betray a moral obligation to his son? Is selling the family history behind your kids' backs the ultimate act of selfishness? I want to know where you stand. Are you team business or team family? Put Team Matt or Team Jeremy in the comments below and tell me why. And do not forget to like this video if you appreciate us bringing you the gritty, unfiltered truth that the TV cameras are afraid to show. Subscribe to the channel because this story is far from over. The steeple is gone, but the feud is just beginning. We will be watching the farm. We will be listening to the insiders. And as soon as the next brick falls, we will be here to tell you about it. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the things we build end up tearing us apart. Why? This is the question that haunts this entire narrative. Why would a father watch his son crumble and not open the door? The answer, according to those whispering in the background of this saga, is strictly business. Matt knew he had no defense. He knew the steeple was sold. He knew the contract with the Japanese collector was ironclad. Opening the door wouldn't have saved the steeple. It would have only exposed him to Jeremy's unfiltered wrath. So, in a move that defines the current state of the Roloff family, Matt chose self-preservation over resolution. He chose to let Jeremy scream at a piece of wood rather than face him man to man. We are hearing reports that immediately after Jeremy sped off, Matt made a phone call. Not to Jeremy, not to apologize, but allegedly to the salvage crew foreman. The rumor is that Matt wanted to ensure the incident hadn't delayed the loading of the container. He reportedly asked, "Is the item secured? Is it ready for transport?" Think about the coldness of that priority. His son just severed the relationship on his front porch, and his concern was potentially the shipping schedule for the architectural salvage. This creates a picture of a man who has completely compartmentalized his life. The business is in one box, and the family is in another, and he has locked the family box and thrown away the key. The fallout from this afternoon didn't stay contained to the farm. As Jeremy drove home, the adrenaline crash must have been brutal. He had to walk into his own home, to his wife Audrey, and explain that not only did he fail to get the steeple, but he also likely burned the bridge with his father permanently. Sources close to the couple suggest that Audrey has been a fierce defender of Jeremy in this situation. She knows how much that western town meant to him. She knows the promise that Matt allegedly made. And seeing her husband come home brokenhearted and empty-handed has reportedly hardened her stance against the farm even more. If you thought the holidays were awkward before, imagine them now. How do you sit at a Thanksgiving table with a man who sold your childhood memories to a stranger in Japan and then hid behind a door while you begged for an explanation? You don't. You simply don't show up. This incident at the big house is the line in the sand. It is the moment where passive aggressiveness turned into active hostility. Let's talk about that Japanese collector again, because the symbolism there is what makes this truly tragic. We have dug into this insider theory, and the details are gut-wrenching. The speculation is that the buyer isn't just a private individual, but potentially a developer creating a nostalgic Americana experience overseas. This means the Roloff Western town steeple, the very icon of Jeremy's Oregon childhood, could end up as a prop in a theme park or a commercial district across the Pacific. It will be stripped of its context. It will be stripped of the memories of the Roloff kids playing hide and seek. It will just be a cool aesthetic object for tourists to take selfies with, completely unaware of the family drama and the heartbreak that fueled its arrival there. Jeremy knows this, and that knowledge eats away at him. It's the ultimate loss of control. He can't even drive past it to see it anymore. It is being exiled, and in a way, Jeremy is being exiled too. The farm is no longer his home. It's just a business asset that his father is liquidating. In the days following the screaming match, the silence between the two households has reportedly been absolute. No texts, no emails, no attempts at mediation. It is a cold war. Matt continues to post on social media about his projects, his builds, and his new life, seemingly oblivious to the crater he has left in his son's heart. But look closely at the comments section. The fans are noticing. The viewers are starting to piece it together. The demolition of the Western town wasn't just a renovation, it was an eviction of the past.